This challenge is particularly even more compounded in our country because by 2030, we will be the most populous country in the world. And if we continue to grow at the same rate that we are growing today, which is about 7.5% annual GDP growth, our current GDP, which is about 2 to 2.5 trillion US dollars, will more than double, which will be about $6 trillion economy by 2030. And will be actually one of the three biggest richest countries in the world in terms of the absolute GDP that a country generates. Now, this will also, if this does happen, this will also create additional somewhere around 400 to 500 million middle class population. And when that happens, the consumption of a wide range of things go up. And one of the most important things that happens is that diets change. Yeah? As people start eating less cereals, more fruits, and more animal protein. And this puts an enormous pressure on agriculture. Now, I was a witness to something like this when I spent 11 years in Singapore in the regional marketing and regional business manager for Asia Pacific, and I witnessed this happen in China. China was a net exporter of agricultural produce up until about 2001, 2002. Today, China imports 40 million metric tons of soybeans. Just to give you the perspective, India grows about 11 million hectares of soybean with an average yield of about 1 to 1.5 metric ton per hectare. So we produce about 10.5, 10.2 metric tons of soybean. 4 times of that is what China imports. And why do they import that? They import that to feed the pigs, which they consume as pork. Yeah? China also has 33 million hectares of corn with some of the highest levels of productivity in the world, about 6 metric tons on an average across the 33 million hectares. And still in year 2010, China became a net importer of corn. For the first time, they started to import corn into China. So this is the kind of dynamics that one can experience with the population dynamics. And yet, we have a pretty challenging situation when it comes to agriculture because we have pretty fragmented holdings. We heard that in most crops we have lower than the world average in productivity. I think there is only one crop where we are actually much better than the world average, and that is potatoes. And we are one country where there is a tremendous amount of impact of, farm economics. And I think Lucas talked about it. Farm economics is a huge challenge in our country. Yes, it's good to hear that you must have all heard that Ministry of Agriculture is no longer Ministry of Agriculture. It is actually Ministry of Agriculture and Farm Welfare. And there is a program aiming at doubling the farmer income by 2020 or 2019. However, there has not been much progress that has been made. And the reasons are pretty compounded, including a number of policy issues. So that's one of the challenges that we face. And the irony is really 2017 was the year when India's agricultural production was one of the highest that we have seen in the last 10 years, and yet the farm economics has been one of the worst. So that also gives you the kind of complexity that we deal with. And last, to talk about climate change, and Prem alluded to it, but I want to speak specifically about the Indian. As a company which has substantial interest in agriculture, we have been looking at the monsoon data for the last about 100 years. And in fact, in India, you have data available for about last 100 years. And if you look at the last 100-year monsoon data, you will find that invariably, every decade, you have 2 years of drought or deficit rains, and you have 3 years of excess rains, and on an average about 5 years of normal rains. However, in the last about 10 years, if you look at the data, the number of deficit years have increased. Actually, in the last decade, the number of deficit years is about 3, and the number of excess years is also 2. So this is the kind of change that we are seeing today. And then monsoon spread has also not been as good or as uniform as it used to be in the past. So this is another very important challenge that our country faces against this huge need to increase productivity quite substantially. Now, the only way we can overcome this is through innovation, and you heard that, and that is what we are all here about. And again, here I want to take 1 minute to differentiate between invention and innovation. We do a lot of inventions. There is technology. There is absolutely no shortage of technology. However, innovation is then able, the ability to take that and convert that, scale it up, and also make money out of it and create value for the society and people at large. And that's the difference between invention and innovation. And this is actually very important in the context of the amount of money that goes into the research and the real impact that really the research then finally has on the average farmer in our country. So having said this, where are the areas of innovation that we need? Clearly, we need innovation in the area of increasing production. There are aspects of digitization that is happening in the world, particularly in country, which gives us tremendous opportunity to innovate and create more equitable distribution and better crop, and I will talk a little bit about it. So let me take each one of these factors that are there and illustrate it with one example. We talked about productivity, and here is a graph showing the productivity of different states for different crops, and you can see that soybean less than half of the world average, and the simple reason is that less than about 5% of the entire soybean that is cultivated in this country is irrigated. The rest is all rain-fed, so it is really subject to monsoon. But even in rice and wheat, you see tremendous variation between states. And you can see in wheat, we actually have Punjab, which produces much better than even the world average. However, there are other states where production is very less. So it illustrates that technology is not the limiting factor. It is actually something else that is limiting from raising the overall productivity. And this is where I want to come to an initiative that BASF had undertaken in soybeans for about 10 years, which is called Samruddhi. Samruddhi, which is a Sanskrit word for prosperity. And here, what we did was we had a herbicide, a very good herbicide that we wanted to launch in soybean about 15 years ago. That was the time when all the weeding in soybean used to be done only by hand weeding by laborers. We know from science that in soybean, the critical period for weed competition about 35 days. So if you do not control weeds in 35 days, you might as well let the weeds go because it will not do any harm to the soybeans. And yet, when you do hand weeding, most people do it only after 25 to 30 days. So most of the loss already is there, and the farmer is spending a lot of money employing laborers and pulling out weeds, which is really not causing a problem. And that's when we decided that our go-to-market approach has to come substantially changed. There is no use just trying to sell herbicides. We need to really teach the farmers how to grow soybeans. And this was what Samruddhi was all about. And if you really think about it, the biggest need gap in Indian farming is a reliable source of information to the farmer on how he or she can improve productivity in the farm. And so we trained our people, and our people spent substantial amount of time doing demonstrations, starting from spacing of how to space and how to treat soybean seeds, all the way to harvest and taking to the mandi to show the difference in the quality of soybean that is produced with our protocol versus the conventional protocol and get better money. And this really, and you can see there the numbers, we have worked with hundreds, thousands of farmers over the last 10 years. That slide actually had the results of a study that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, who went and actually did a public audit of people who undertook this program and came back and said that their input costs went up by about 2 to 3%, their yield increased by about 26%, and their net profit increased by 37%. Now, here you are really increasing the farm economics by a technology which is delivered through innovation by really working with the farmers and teaching them how to grow the crop better. And by the way, our business in soybean went from about 100 crores or something like that, or maybe 50, 60 crores in the year 2004 to 600 crores by 2010. And so it created value not only for the farmer, but it also created value for the company. Now I want to move into this whole area of digital, and I believe that in India, the digitalization provides a tremendous opportunity. You can see that we are one of the leading countries in the world using mobile technology and leading countries in the world using internet already. Now, with Geo coming in, which has basically reduced the cost of 1 GB of data to something like 6 rupees, the internet revolution is going to go even further. And here is another great example of innovation, because mobiles existed. However, in that environment, a company like Jio could come in and radically change the whole game. And this will, I believe, again, revolutionize the way communication happens in this country. And this also gives us tremendous opportunity as companies involved in agriculture, because now we can deliver a number of information to the farmers and teach farmer to make decisions which are much more based on facts and less on what historically he or she thought, or various other emotions. Yeah? So this is an important kind of development. Now, Prem also alluded to the loss, and I want to talk about two innovations on how you can even address this innovation or address this challenge. And India, this challenge is huge. I think the last estimate that I've seen is that about 98,000 crores of rupees is lost in perish, because fruits, vegetables, and food get perished because of inadequate storage conditions. Now, one of the innovations that we introduced was, and since we are in the season of mangoes, you all know that there are huge number of mangoes that is transported in trucks, which are covered by general tarpaulin in this country. And in summer months, when the temperature is 40, 45 degrees centigrade, tremendous amount of loss happens because the heat builds up under these tarpaulins. Now, we developed a tarpaulin which has got a black inorganic and organic pigment, which basically reflects all the IR rays. And by just using this black pigment on the surface of the tarpaulin, we were able to reduce the temperature under the tarpaulin by 5 to 6%. Now, here is a simple innovation that reduces temperature 5 to 6% in summer months, and you can kind of imagine the tremendous saving that it will cause in terms of perishing of or rotting of mangoes under that. So that's an innovation, and this is not a BASF innovation, but this is innovation that exists in places like Nashik and Maharashtra, which is for storing onions. And there are 3 crops in India which has the highest volatility in prices and which also brings down governments. It is called TOP, tomatoes, onions, and potatoes. Yeah? And this is about onions. And a scientifically built onion storage can reduce losses by 25 to 30% and prolong, and this is actually used widely around Nashik in Maharashtra. However, this is not adopted in the other parts of India like UP and Bihar and West Bengal, leading to tremendous amount of loss of onions. So there are innovations that exist which for various reasons do not get translated, which is another example and opportunity that organizations like ours have. I want to come back to one big area that BASF has also been looking at. While we are generally known for crop protection products, we do have huge research in looking at beyond crop protection products, particularly into how we can also help to manage both biotic and abiotic stresses through various chemical and biological means, and a combination of both of that. And this is where I think Valagro's unique research actually is of tremendous value. But I wanted to use one example that we recently launched in the United States in corn, which is a combination of a fungicide and a biological fungicide in order to prolong the protection for corn. So generally, when you seed treat any crop with conventional seed treatment products, you can get upwards of about 30, maybe 40 days of control. The whole concept here was how can we prolong the control to maybe 60 days. And we found that we can effectively do this by combining one of our active ingredient called F500 and I think in this case it was Bacillus subtilis, which is furrow applied in corn. And we found that with this combination, we are able to protect corn from various Pythium and Rhizoctonia diseases up to 60 days by this application. So here is a combination of a biological and a chemical technology that really synergizes and enhances protection. So another example of how innovation can change things. My last couple of points is going to be about doing things responsibly. I think, we all talk about sustainability in agriculture. So what does it mean finally? Yes, of course, as we use less chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers and use more biologicals, etc., you can generally consider it as more sustainable. But there are also tools available today, such as the Ag Balance tools, which can measure up to 64 parameters in a production system and compare production system to say which one is more sustainable and which is less. And we actually, in this very city, we have worked with the Directorate of Rice Research to compare irrigated and upland rice using this Ag Balance tool, and we have very well established that a direct seeded rice production system is significantly more sustainable than the current transplanted irrigated rice system. So this is an example, and there are tools available, and with production systems like what Valagro comes up with, launches, there is an opportunity to even demonstrate to policymakers that this is more sustainable way of doing business. Lastly, as all of us who are involved in agriculture, particularly when it comes to applying input, one very, very important factor that we need to really focus on is safety and educating farmers and educating ourselves about safety. This is a program that BASF undertakes quite seriously, covering large number of farmers. Also the only company which actually sells protective equipment and clothing on a non-profit basis. This has come in very handy in situations like what happened in Yavatmal this year. We were the only company which was actually not penalized by the government for what happened, because they found that we were responsibly promoting safety. So I would also encourage that this is a very important topic that we need to really take up as those of us who are involved in agriculture. Lastly, just to sum it up, as I said, the challenge that we face is humongous. I am also a very big optimist. I think we have the technologies that is available to address this challenge, but we need very, very innovative ways to bring this into the market, innovative ways to demonstrate to the farmers the value, and I'm really happy, and I wish Valagro and the team the very best to be successful and bring your technologies into this country and create value for the farmers and also for the country. Thank you very much.